Welcome back once again to our 2017 block of the month and block number 6. This month we're going to be adding a secret message pocket to the variable star block. We're going to give it a little twist. I can never emphasize this enough. We're working with bias edges, so make sure you starch before cutting. After choosing your fabrics, color A is represented in green here. We need to cut 6 3.5-inch squares. And then we're going to cut those squares in half diagonally until we end up with 12 triangles. Color B is represented by white in the drawing. We need to cut 2 3.5-inch squares. We cut those 3.5-inch squares also in half diagonally. Now to save some time, you can stack them and cut them all at one time. You also need to cut one 6-inch square from color B. This 6-inch square needs to be cut diagonally and then again diagonally the opposite direction. This will yield 4 larger triangles. For color C, we need to cut one piece 5 inches square. Shh! This part is the secret. 2 pieces, 3 inches by 5 inches. You also need to cut 2 1.5-inch squares. Now we need to make a 1/2-inch hem on one side of these pieces. I do that by marking 1 inch in from the edge. Then when it's time to press in that hem, I just take the raw edge, line it up against my marked line, and press, and voila, perfect 1/2-inch hem every time. Repeat the same process with the other piece. Now we're going to take those 1.5-inch squares, fold them in half, and press. Let's instill fear and intrepidation in everyone. Let's insert a zipper. What? Now calm down. It's going to be easy, I promise. Now it doesn't matter what size zipper you buy. You really only need a 5-inch zipper, but they're kind of hard to come by, so we'll make our own. The only thing that you have to make sure of is it is a polyester core zipper. Now we need to make a fabric stopper for our zipper. So we're going to pull the tab down a little bit so that we can get the top part of the twill tape on the zipper to come closer together. Now most people would think that you would insert it this way, but that's not the way we're going to do it. We want to have the folded edge or the finished edge towards the zipper teeth. So that means we're going to have our raw edges against the top of the zipper tape and just somewhat center it over the zipper and then stitch 1/4 inch away from the fold line. So you can see our raw edges are together and everything is secure. When the zipper goes up, it will hit that strip and stop. Now we already had one on that side. Now is the critical side. So we're going to take our 5-inch square and place it over top of our zipper, keeping the top of the zipper even with one edge. And let's mark 5 inches on the zipper, because remember we need a 5-inch zipper. So if we lay that marked piece down on our piece of 5-inch square fabric, you'll see that the mark comes right to the edge. That's what we want. Just like we inserted a zipper stop on the top side, we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. We're going to put the raw edge of that folded square on the line that we just drew. And then we're going to, once again, stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the folded edge. And yes, you can stitch right over that zipper cord because it's polyester. Now this is the reason we did that. When we pull that zipper down, it won't go any further than our stop. We now have made our own 5-inch zipper. All you have to do is cut off the remaining tail of the zipper and we're all set. Now let's study this zipper. Do you see how there's a little core of fabric or a cord that is alongside the zipper teeth? That's what we want to lay our fabric against. That will provide you with a straight stitching line. So we're going to take our folded edge, place it down along that corded edge, not on the zipper teeth, but on the corded edge. Make sure that the raw edge of the zipper stop and the short edge of your 3 by 5 inch piece line up. Now with your regular foot, you'll stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the folded edge once again. It's very hard to go around the tab of the zipper and keep a straight line, so stitch so far down, then raise your foot with your needle down in your fabric, pull that zipper tab out of your way, and continue stitching. Now we're going to repeat the same process for the other side. Zip up your zipper so that you can easily see that coil. Now let's place the folded edge of that piece of fabric against that cording on the zipper and start to stitch. When you get up so far, stop, raise your foot, pull that zipper tab out of the way, get it out of there so you can stitch straight, and continue on stitching this side of the zipper. You have just now inserted your zipper. That wasn't hard at all, was it? It's now time to create the pocket. And we do that by placing the 5-inch square and the zippered square with the right sides up. And we're going to pin those at the corner. Remember, it's going to be right sides up on both pieces. Now you might notice when you turn your square to the back side that you're slightly off on the dimensions. We're going to trim off that excess. So for now, let's concentrate on the 5-inch square and stitch 1/8 of an inch around the entire square to form our pocket. You have just created your own secret message pocket where we can tuck in secret little messages to the quilt recipient. Now let's get the rest of this block done by chain piecing our triangles together, our half square triangles. So we're going to take one of color A, one of color B. We're going to line up the long edges and we're going to stitch. Now as we're doing this, we're stitching with a 1/4 inch seam, of course, and we're going to just chain piece these to save a little bit of time. So hold on to your hats. Here we go. And since we've heavily starched these fabric pieces, it's almost like stitching paper together. They go together so nicely, and they're not stretching out of shape for us at all. Now all we have to do is clip the threads between each of the triangles and take it over to the pressing surface and press the blocks open. And there's your half square triangles. I've purposely made these blocks oversized. We need to square them down to 2 3/4 inches. We're going to start that by putting the 45-degree line on the square. Make sure you extend past the 2 3/4 inch mark on both edges. Trim away the excess fabric, but don't move your ruler until you're sure you've trimmed it away cleanly. Now turn your block around and align the 2 3/4 inch guidelines on the block underneath your ruler. And again, place your ruler firmly against the block and trim. Again, don't move your ruler until the trim pieces are taken away. See? That's why. If you had to put your ruler back down, you may not have gotten it exactly in the same place. Now on to work with the larger triangles that you cut with color B and the smaller triangles from color A. That's the way they should line up. You want to make sure that you're putting the one edge of the gold triangle in this case against the bottom edge of the white triangle with the excess hanging out the top. And then we're going to stitch. We're going to continue in the same manner, lining up the blocks so that you're sure you're getting them organized correctly, getting them down at the bottom edge of the white square, and stitch. And we're going to chain piece these 4 triangles together. Once again, we'll clip these triangles apart and take them over to the pressing surface and press them open. And we are going to press these towards the dark side. Now it's time to add the triangles to the second half, or the opposite side. And we're going to do that exactly the same way. You can see I've already started to chain piece these blocks. And we're just finishing up with our last square. So just like before, we're going to continue our stitching and we'll be done with this whole series. After we finish stitching these, we'll clip them apart and go to the pressing station, and then time for squaring up. For rectangular, we need to put the ruler 1/4 inch away from the point of the center white triangle and trim. Now let's turn that rectangle around. Place the edge that we just trimmed on the 2 3/4 inch mark and trim the bottom. Now we need to make this block 5 inches wide. So how are we going to do that? Well, the easiest way is to use that center point of the triangle again. And let's put our 2 1/2 inch mark right on that triangle point and keep your bottom edge of that rectangle parallel with the line. Now let's go ahead and trim off the edge. Now this last part is easy. All we have to do is line the 5 inch mark up with the edge that you just cut and trim the other side. And we now have a perfectly centered triangle in a 5 inch rectangle. Now it's time to put it all together. Square your center block to 5 inches square. Now we're going to lay out how this block will be assembled. If you notice, we're going to put all the gold triangles towards the zipper block. And that's going to form our star. Then we're going to take our smaller half square triangles and place them in the corners with the gold always pointing to the outside of the block, like so. Okay, so what's wrong with this picture? Well, remember I said you have to put all the gold towards the center. Now we have a square. Now just as before, we can take these pieces and assembly line stitch them together to complete our final square. Start with the top row, place it under the needle and stitch my 1/4 inch, making sure my raw edges are even. Then I'm going to take the zippered middle row, make sure my raw edges are together again. Now when I'm stitching this part, I want to take special caution that as I stitch it, I am hitting the point of that triangle so that my points line up nicely. And then I'm going to take the last section and stitch that in place. Now it's time to do the same thing on the other side. So now we're ready to stitch these rows together. Make sure all your golds are together. If they're not, fix it now. Also make sure that you have all your gold triangles or whatever color you used facing the outside. Now we're ready to stitch each row together. Again, making sure that when you press these, the seam should be pressed towards the middle on the first and third row and pressed towards the outside on the middle row. That will help to nest your seams as you're putting your points together and make everything line up well without even needing pins. Now if you want a pin, go ahead, but it's really not necessary because they nest so nicely in those seams. So let's go ahead and stitch these. And you want to make sure that you're keeping that 1/4 inch seam going because we have that white triangle on the opposite side. Now if you don't like stitching blind, when we stitch it the next time I'll show you, we'll just flip it over the opposite way and stitch so you can see what you're doing. but as long as you keep a consistent 1/4 of an inch, you'll be fine. Now, one of the advantages of using your fingers as pins, I could feel that that seam underneath had flipped, so I could stop and fix it before stitching over top of it. And now for the reveal. You can see we have nice points. The point for the big white triangle came in right at the zippered portion, just like we wanted it. Now let's flip it over again. And this time let's stitch it from the other side so that you can see the white triangle as you're stitching. So again, I've got my seams nested together, and I'm going to start to stitch. Now as I get closer to that triangle, I'm going to exercise caution because I can see the stitching line right there. So I'm going to exercise caution so that when I stitch, I don't stitch inside of the triangles already stitched line. If that makes any sense, that will give me a perfect point when I flip it over. So we'll continue on stitching, and we can call this block done. And now the only thing that remains is to tuck your little love note into your block. How about some money for the graduate in a memory quilt, the newlyweds, birthdays, holidays, special occasions? And how about a special secret pocket in the next baby quilt you make to allow the tooth fairy to make her deposit? Time to get your creative juices flowing on that one. I so hope you enjoyed this block as much as I did bringing it to you. Talk to you next time.